Hi, so let's talk a little bit about advice-based decisions and how to analyze the advice from multiple people. Um, when advice-based decisions are part of the procedures in your company, it can be quite difficult to actually transform every piece of advice that one receives into a decision. Even though you might know a little bit about qualitative data analysis, this will not actually help you reach a decision. And this is because analyzing data in order to make decisions requires a certain type of structure, as opposed to analyzing data for interviews or focus groups aimed at exploring, understanding, or uncovering meanings. On the other hand, when the decision is complex, um, aggregating all the data into do this, don't do that, it can be quite daunting. So in general, in a well-designed research, aimed from the very beginning at making decisions, the structure of the analysis derives directly from the research design and is linked to each question in the questionnaire or interview guide. However, if your field is not research, and you need to make an advice-based decision, you might actually want to steer your efforts into implementing the solution as into your own field rather than understanding the nuts and bolts of research, and particularly decision-making research, right? So in this video, I would like to give you a shortcut to help you transform the advice received into a decision. And in order to do this, you have to consider two things. First, the tools that you can use to analyze the pieces of advice. And second, the decision-making structure needed to make the decision. So let's start with the tools. First one. If you can afford a simple tool for online teamwork, I would recommend using Miro to analyze the answers, possibly also for collecting the pieces of advice, either anonymously or nominally. Now, this tools allows you to analyze the data in a visual manner. You can paste any parts of the analysis into your final aggregation tool, for example. And in this way, you can basically cluster everything to the point at which you can make a decision. Miro also has a teamwork feature, such that multiple teams can work on the same online workspace at the same time. The second tool, you could use this one if you want to reuse some software that you already have for this new purpose. And you can use Excel or LibreOffice or any available spreadsheet tool that you have. There are specialized tools for analyzing qualitative data like NVivo, MaxQDA, or the RQDA packages in R. But these may require you to learn to use these pieces of software. And you will still need a decision-making structure to help you analyze and transform your data into a decision. So no matter what tool you use, this video is going to be useful. So just to cut things short, I'm going to show you an example of workflow that you can use in order to analyze the advice received by structuring it in a certain way. And to do this, we're going to use a decision-making structure. So what is a decision-making structure? It is basically something that a set of concepts or a set of categories that you construct in order to link what you know with what you do. Now, it is called a structure because its elements are linked to each other in a certain way. There are many decision structures out there. The one that I prefer to use is, in my view, the most complete, and it structures any piece of information in order to help you make a decision. So the structure is like this. The first category is the decision problem. The second one, options. Third, criteria. Fourth, how we compare the criteria, how we compare the options. What are the evaluations of the options based on the criteria, right? Fifth, what are our preferences or our advisor's preferences between the options? Fifth, I have to use a second hand. Fifth, what are the relevant values that go into my advisor's answers? Then seventh, what are the emotions that are involved for my advisors? And finally, eighth, what are the identities which are influenced by performing the options? So we will discuss them shortly. Now I just want to show you, I'm going to share my screen. Right, so just so you have a visual idea, a decision-making structure means that we take what we know into something that we can do. What makes it important and useful is that this structure splits our knowledge into several categories that we need to consider differently. So the information that you have will be treated differently than the emotions that you have. And this means that your decision will have to combine a series of steps. And for each step, you will refer to either the feelings, that is the emotions, the knowledge that you have, and the values that you have. For each one of them, there are different steps and different sort of parts of the decision that you need to implement. Okay. So let's take an example. Suppose that you work in an insurance company and you would like to take advice on changing the client referral policy. Well, some random example. First of all, you would need to translate this question into a decision-making problem. For example, should we change the client referral policy, yes or no? Or should we change the client referral policy from policy A to policy B? Now, once your question is defined, and unfortunately in this video, I don't have time to explain the process of getting from the apparent question to your real decision-making question. But I have to assume that your question is well defined. So if it is so, suppose you have initiated some short questionnaire or series of interviews to help you gather advice from relevant stakeholders in your company. Let's assume that you did not know about the decision structures before making this survey. So now you have data that you need to aggregate in a way that helps you make the decision. it may be possible that some parts of this data is not usable for decision-making purposes. And this can happen and it's very normal. But some of it might. So in order to identify which data is important for your decision, you can start using the decision-making structure. In order to do that, you can use a set of questions to help you structure the data so you can make a decision. So I'm going to show you. Okay, so let's, this is a mirror board, by the way. So to get from your data to the structure that will help you make a decision, you can ask the following questions. First, how do your advisors frame the problem? Are there substantial differences? And believe me when I tell you, these substantial differences are super important because they will create conflicts. If you don't take them into consideration, you'll end up with conflicts between people. Second, what do your advisors' perspective? What? Oh, what do your advisors perceive to be the main goal behind this problem? So, you might already know this from practice, but in general, everybody has a different goal. Unless you elicit this goal in your advisor's answers, you're going to stumble into big conflicts. Or you're going to see people heavily sabotaging the solution. Third, what are the options that they see? Do they mention other options than the ones you placed in your decision-making question? Fourth, what are the criteria that your advisors perceive to be important in order to achieve their goal? Their goal. This is important. Not necessarily your goal. Then, fifth question, what are the most important values which are expressed through their answers? And here, things can be tricky. Let's take some examples of values. So people could tell you things like, it is not fair that we do this. We should do this other thing. Fairness is a very important value. You can have answers like, we began with this thing, we need to continue. It's about improving what we have started. This is a type of commitment, right? And this is a value. And it's why are values super important? Because they divide people. Now, if you want to not only cluster the advice of your advisors, but also find a solution that everybody will agree with and or they will support and they will help you enforce it, you need to understand what their values are, and how you can reconcile them. This is a big discussion. But yeah, let's see the next question. What are the most important emotions that your advisors express? And what are the needs they point out to? Now, in an interview situation, you would be fairly easily able to find this out. In a questionnaire, this can be tricky. You can address this question directly, but you never know whether the emotions stated are the same as emotions felt. You can also find this out by directly speaking to people. And these are important as well because you need to address in your solution the needs of the people that will help you implement the solution. What is it that they need? And sometimes these are not directly stated, and there might not be needs that are directly related to the job. They might be needs, personal needs, which are just as valid. But they might heavily block your solution when you implement it. And seventh, you need to ask the question, how do your options influence your advisor's perception of who they are and who they would like to be in the company, in the organization? Are there any risks that they perceive for their desired position as a result of implementing either option? And I think at this point you can imagine how heavily conflicts might stem from this. Okay, these are the questions. Let's see how we can use them. So how can you use these questions? I'm going to give you an example of how to analyze an interview by using a decision-making structure, by helping yourself with these questions. And I'll do it in two ways, using two tools. First, a mirror board, and one with Excel. Okay. Sharing screen again. Okay, let's zoom out. And this, maybe I can do it in presentation mode. Oh, not this one, this one. So this is an example of a tool that you can use to analyze every interview that you make with your advisors. You can enter here the interview name or a code if you want it to be anonymous. You can have here the questions in your interview guide, and here the questions that will help you transform your data into actual decision. Now, some of the categories that I'm going to present, you already know them, but some of them, I'm pretty sure you're not actually using them. So let's see. Now, the decision-making structure, as I mentioned, has the following elements: the problem, the options, the criteria, the preferences, which means comparing the options and having an order between them, relevant values, emotions about options, and identities involved or at risk. Now, if you analyze interviews, you might be listening to the recorded tape and, for example, write down anything that is relevant, and you basically make a sticky note. Yeah, you just put a sticky note here and you write oh, this is a terrible sticky note. So sticky note, you make a sticky note and then you can insert whatever information you have from the interview. You can use additional colors to give a little bit more structure to your to the answers. For example, if one of the interviewees mentions two types of framings for the same problem, then you would have here problem C. Yeah, we already have A and B here. And you go on and so forth with each category, writing the relevant information. At the end, you're going to have to duplicate this frame for another interviewee. And when you're done with all of them, you will be able to make boards for how you should define the problem so that everybody's on board, how you should define the options to include everybody's options, what are all the relevant criteria, um, what are people's preferences, and most importantly, where do people's preferences collide? And also, what are the values that are important? And again, emphasize potential conflicts. What are the emotions and the needs that are reflected in them, and how can you address them? And what are the identities that are involved, and particularly the ones that are at risk, and devise a plan to address these. Okay, great. So once you have all interviews analyzed in this way, all you need to do is to decide how you'd like to aggregate them. You can do this in many ways. You can consider the most frequent answer. You can consider including everybody's opinion and find a solution to make everybody happy. This would be a consensus-based decision. You might also like to consider reiterating the process of advice taking with some new solution which has emerged from this round of advice. Either way, I really suggest that whatever you do, the way in which you aggregate your answers, that whatever you do, you have to make this very clear from the very beginning and to everybody. And to keep in mind that anybody who challenges the way that the opinions of advisors are aggregated has a valid question. Because with the same information, using different aggregation methods, you can reach very different decisions. Now, the power of the tool that I'm presenting here is that it allows you to identify potential conflicts from the very beginning, from the research stage. And conflicts are never really about the options. They're about values, they're about emotions, they're about who I am, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. But either way, you have to be ready at any point to justify your choice. Now, this is the example that I wanted to give you, but keep in mind the fact that in this clip, I've not touched on several important issues around advice taking. First of all, sampling the experts or stakeholders. Then I didn't talk about defining the research question. There is a process to it and how you get to the real question. I also didn't talk about what other types of aggregation methods there are, and how to deal with aggregating, for example, different emotions or different values, or conflicts on identities, right? In people's position in the company and stuff like that. I also didn't touch on what other types of decision structures are out there and for what kinds of decisions are they useful. I'm going to present the same analysis done with Excel. Okay, so now you've seen exactly, you've seen in Miro how we were analyzing the responses of each respondent, basically. You'd be doing exactly the same thing on an Excel sheet. However, here you would have, like in any database, all the respondents in on one line, and every line corresponding to the answers of one respondent. The only difference is that in Miro, you could have all the types of answers which belong to, for example, the category problem in a single row visually. Here, if you want to add, for example, this respondent talks about 2 frames of the problem, or something like that, then you would insert another column here. You would call this one problem 1, and then name the second column problem 2. So you would have, instead of sticky notes with problem A, problem B, then you would have different columns here. Same for the options. If they mention more options than you were hoping for, you would simply make more columns here, as many as each respondent needs. So we have the same categories: problem, options, criteria, comparisons of options, relevant values, emotions about options, and identities involved or at risk. Okay, and each respondent corresponds to a line, right? At the end, basically what we would do, if you don't have too many advisors, if you have about 10 or something, you can still aggregate the data by hand, like just take all these columns and write a report about this. Take all these options and see what are the common options, and so on and so forth, right? Okay, so I hope this helps. Of course, there will be questions after this, because this is very general and it might seem difficult to apply it to your actual case, but let me know if you have questions. Okay, I'll be glad to answer them. To keep this short, I hope this helps, and thanks for watching. I hope to hear from you soon.